trade between countries can be smooth, but sometimes it becomes a battlefield. That's exactly what happened in April 2025 when US President Donald Trump made a surprise announcement. Under a new campaign called Liberation Day, he said the US would raise tariffs, extra taxes, on foreign goods. His goal was to protect American factories and bring jobs back to the US. But this also meant serious trouble for countries that send goods to the US, especially Mexico. But in a shocking twist, Trump has been caught off guard as Mexico President Claudia Sheinbaum has responded swiftly and strongly. Her swift response when the tariff war started is probably the reason why Trump has now excluded Mexico from the new tariffs announced against all countries.
Mexico celebrated being spared Wednesday's sweeping tariffs from Washington.
The consequences of this face-off between the United States and Mexico could be devastating for both sides. But what's truly shocking is how President Sheinbaum is proving that even a country like Mexico can stand up to a giant like the US and trigger ripple effects across the globe. In this video, we break down everything that's happening, why it matters, and what could come next. Don't forget to subscribe and stay with us till the end. Mexico depends heavily on trade with the US, especially in the car industry. Around 80% of all cars made in Mexico are sold in the US. So if the US charges higher taxes on those cars, it could cause big problems for Mexico's economy. Jobs could be lost, factories could slow down, and prices could rise. But Mexico's new president, Claudia Sheinbaum, didn't panic. Instead of shouting back or calling for revenge, she reminded the US about the USMCA trade deal, an agreement made in 2020 between the US, Mexico, and Canada to keep trade fair and smooth between the three countries. Thanks to her calm but strong response, Mexico and Canada were not hit with the harshest new tariffs. While many other countries were caught off guard by Trump's sudden policy shift, Mexico stayed on safe ground. During her remarks on Thursday, Mexico's President Claudia Sheinbaum referred to her most recent conversation with Donald Trump. Sheinbaum explained that based on her understanding of reciprocal tariff agreements, no tariffs would be imposed on Mexico. She stated this was because Mexico does not place tariffs on goods from the United States, and therefore, under the principle of reciprocity, the US would not impose tariffs on Mexican products either. But Sheinbaum didn't stop at just defending her country in words. She knew that this close call was a warning sign. What if next time Mexico isn't spared? That's why she introduced a new plan called Plan Mexico. It has 18 parts, all focused on making Mexico's economy stronger and less dependent on imports from other countries. One of the biggest parts of the plan is to increase the number of cars made in Mexico by 10%. Another goal is to use more parts made in Mexico instead of importing them from abroad, aiming for a 15% increase in domestic content in car manufacturing. This way, if trade problems happen again, Mexico will be more prepared. Behind the scenes, many car companies like Ford, Toyota, and General Motors were also watching nervously. These companies rely on smooth trade between the US and Mexico. A big tariff could ruin their production schedules. Some of them were already thinking about moving their factories or slowing down investments until things calm down. All of this shows just how tightly connected the US and Mexican economies really are. If one side makes a sudden move, both sides feel the shock. And while Mexico handled this crisis well, the bigger question is, how safe is the future of trade in North America? One of the most important strategies of Mexico in this tariff war is the Mirror Tariff Retaliation Plan. This was not just for show. It was a very detailed and powerful tool. Mexico's foreign ministry designed a plan to respond to US trade tariffs by hitting back with their own, but in a very targeted way. According to documents shared by diplomats, Mexico had studied which American exports were most sensitive. Their focus was on things like corn and soybeans, which are especially important in the Midwestern US states. These crops are not just food, they are key to the US economy and politics. At the same time, Mexico's diplomats were quietly meeting with important American industries. They spoke with car manufacturers, farm organizations, and even powerful farmers in Republican-leaning states like Texas and Iowa. These talks were smart. If Mexico and the US started a trade war, factories could shut down. That would affect jobs in places like Detroit, Ohio, and Alabama. The car industry became very worried and started pressuring Washington to be careful. At the same time, American farmers were told that if Mexico placed tariffs on their crops, it could be a disaster. Many of these farmers rely on Mexico as a top buyer. In 2023, American agricultural exports to Mexico were worth over $28 billion. Tariffs from Mexico would be a serious threat to their income, and during an election year, this would also be a big political problem for US leaders. It is interesting how all these powers were being used quietly, behind the scenes. But things get even more serious. Mexico was no longer just using diplomatic words. It began to show its real power. One of its strongest tools was oil. The US buys around 600,000 barrels of oil every day from Mexico, mostly for use in Gulf Coast refineries. In 2024, because of the war in Eastern Europe and oil supply cuts by OPEC+, this oil became even more important. So, when President Sheinbaum suggested that Mexico might reduce or tax these exports, it caused panic. Big US oil companies like Valero Energy and Phillips 66 quickly raised the alarm in Congress. They were already struggling with rising prices. Bloomberg reported that after Mexico's warning, oil prices jumped 6% in just 2 days. If fuel prices rise in the US, it affects everything: transport, grocery prices, and even voter anger. This was a powerful warning from Mexico. It had control over something the US could not afford to lose. Then came another important issue: immigration. President Sheinbaum sent 10,000 National Guard soldiers to stop illegal border crossings into the US. This wasn't because the US told her to do it. It was a smart move to control the conversation. After this action, the number of illegal crossings dropped by 22% over 2 months, according to US border data. But Sheinbaum didn't just use force. She also showed kindness, opening migrant shelters and creating safe travel routes. This gave her a good image internationally. She also used humor and boldness to turn attention back on the US. In one interview, she showed a chart that said 70% of the guns used by Mexican drug cartels come from the United States. This made her point clear. While the US complains about Mexico's problems, it is part of the problem. One issue that was difficult for Mexicans was the renaming of the Gulf of Mexico. This situation turned into a heated and complex diplomatic mess, one that carries far more weight than many expected. At first glance, it might seem like just a small issue over digital maps. But in reality, it struck a deep nerve in Mexico and exposed serious tensions between national identity, corporate responsibility, and international power politics. On January 20th, 2025, immediately following his inauguration, President Donald Trump signed Executive Order titled Restoring Names That Honor American Greatness. This directive mandated the renaming of the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America within the United States jurisdiction. The executive order instructed the Secretary of the Interior to implement the name change, emphasizing the Gulf's pivotal role in America's economy and global commerce. Consequently, federal agencies were directed to update all official documents, maps, and communications to reflect the new designation. This unilateral move by the US administration ignited immediate controversy, particularly with Mexico, which shares the Gulf's waters. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum publicly opposed the renaming, asserting that Mexico would not recognize the change and emphasizing the historical and cultural significance of the Gulf's original name. The renaming also placed multinational corporations, notably Google, in a precarious position. As a global entity, Google strives to provide accurate and regionally appropriate information. In response to the executive order, Google Maps updated its platform to display Gulf of America for users within the United States, while retaining Gulf of Mexico for users in other countries, including Mexico. This approach aimed to align with local governmental designations and user expectations. However, this decision drew criticism from various quarters. Mexican officials and citizens viewed the change as an endorsement of the US's unilateral action, leading to diplomatic tensions. President Sheinbaum formally requested that Google revert to the original name universally, highlighting concerns over national sovereignty and historical integrity. Fortunately, both countries have moved on from the issue and are satisfied with referring to the Gulf in their respective ways. This just shows one of the many controversial issues Mexico has had to deal with since Trump's return to the White House. Interestingly, this confrontational relationship between the United States and Mexico due to Trump's policies has made the Mexican president more popular than ever. Claudia Sheinbaum's sudden rise to massive popularity is more than just a success story. It's also a warning. Her approval rating rose to an incredible 82%, and while she has strong leadership skills, part of this rise is actually because Mexicans are uniting to show support for their country. When one country acts aggressively or disrespectfully, it can push other countries to become more united, and sometimes even too trusting of their leaders. That's what is happening in Mexico, and it is something we should look at closely and carefully. Sheinbaum leads very differently from the previous president, Andrés Manuel López Obrador, better known as AMLO. AMLO often gave loud, emotional speeches to connect with the people. But Sheinbaum is more focused on facts and practical solutions. Still, she speaks in a way that connects emotionally too. Experts call this pragmatic populism, and it has helped her appear calm, smart, and powerful. She didn't just make Mexicans feel hopeful, she made them feel proud. Trump's return to the spotlight, with wild speeches, threats about building the wall again, and his usual anti-Mexican comments, made many Mexicans feel attacked. In response, they became more supportive of their own leader. Sheinbaum's cool and respectful behavior stood out even more when compared to Trump's dramatic and disrespectful words. Trump himself even said she had composure and class. This raises a serious question. What happens to Sheinbaum's popularity when Trump goes quiet? If her rise is mostly because of Trump's actions, then it might not last. We can see a similar pattern in Canada. During Trump's recent speeches and interviews, he criticized Canada's immigration rules and gun laws and even made fun of how Prime Minister Justin Trudeau looked and spoke. Surprisingly, this didn't make Canadians more angry at their own leaders. Instead, they became more proud of being Canadian. A poll by CBC News showed that Canadian pride was at its highest level in 5 years, even though many problems like housing costs and inflation were still very bad. Trudeau, who was about to step down because of low approval ratings, suddenly became more popular. He didn't do anything new, but the contrast with Trump made him look better. This allowed him to leave office more peacefully. But this kind of popularity is very risky. It's not based on strong ideas or real progress. It's based on comparing a calm leader to a loud and chaotic one. The danger is that people may stop asking hard questions or pushing for better results. So, while Sheinbaum's leadership has been calm and smart, we need to ask, is she truly doing a great job? Or is she just looking good next to Trump's chaos? What happens when Trump fades away or becomes worse? Will people still support her, or will they start to see problems they ignored before? Right now, tensions between Mexico and the United States are in a fragile state of diplomatic neutral. This means that neither side is actively escalating tensions, but nothing has been fully resolved either. While the tariffs that Trump threatened are currently paused, there is no certainty they are gone for good. Many believe they are simply waiting in what some analysts call Trump's policy garage, ready to be rolled out again at any moment, depending on his political goals or moods. In response, Mexico has quietly prepared a layered or tiered strategy to protect itself if things heat up again. There's no open fight, for now, but the silence feels loaded. Both nations are on edge, watching and waiting for the next move. The real question is, when the next move comes, will Mexico once again surprise the world, or will Trump finally get the upper hand? To find out how it all unfolds, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.